You're talking to someone about religion, and as sometimes happens, she turns on the steam. Look, she says, the New Testament is full of contradictions. We can't know what the man Jesus actually did. The Apostle Paul turned Jesus' simple preaching of the coming kingdom into a complicated theological system of sin, judgment, and redemption, and most of the New Testament writers actually believe that the end was coming in their own lifetime. This book is misogynist and anti-Semitic and homophobic and has been used to justify all sorts of horrendous acts of suppression over the ages. Just listen to some of the televangelists. This is a dangerous book. How do you respond? That comes from the Bart Ehrman book, Jesus Interrupted, which I just recently finished reading. And this hypothetical interlocutor kind of sums up more or less what Bart himself was saying in the book. And this is something that he says he uses in classes. He'll be teaching students. It comes towards the end of the semester, and he'll give them this assignment. And he wants to take how they respond and finish the class based on what they say. So I thought it might be good just to take some time and respond to this. The first point that the hypothetical woman brings up is that the New Testament is filled with contradictions. Excuse me. Now, in Jesus Interrupted, there are several let us say discrepancies which Ehrman alludes to, which he goes through, and some of them he says are not contradictions per se, just differences which could be easily explained, but others are more difficult and he thinks probably impossible to explain. Well, I hope to do some separate videos on most of what he says in that regard, so I'll leave that question aside for now. Next, the Apostle Paul turning the simple preaching of the kingdom into a complicated theological system of sin, judgment, and redemption. Well, I think that the fact that men are sinful and deserving of judgment, and therefore in need of redemption, is kind of the main theme of the entire Old Testament. Jesus, as a good Jewish rabbi, would certainly have affirmed all the things from the law of Moses and so on. Now, I know there's passages we can turn to which he'll say, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I tell you to turn the other cheek, and so on and so forth. But the fact is that he did say, according to the New Testament, the Gospels, that he has not come to I forget the exact word, but to get rid of the law, but to fulfill it. Before heaven and earth pass away, one jot and one tittle shall no wise pass from the law until all is fulfilled. And the second thing is this idea of a coming kingdom, a kingdom of God. What does that entail? Well, that entails God's kingdom on earth, in which righteousness dwells, in which sin is eradicated ultimately, and people, there will be a last judgment. Jesus speaks of the last judgment. It's in later parts of the New Testament as well. So there's really nothing new in Paul that hasn't already been said by Jesus. Most of the New Testament writers actually believe that the end was coming in their own lifetime. This is a common view, but I don't think it is correct. when Jesus is, I believe, on the Olivet Discourse, he's talking about the end of all things and so on. He says that only the Father knows when the end will be. That even he, that is Jesus himself, does not know when the end will come. So it seems that on the basis of that, that when Jesus said, some of those standing here will not taste death until they see some kind of end, it seems that he's not talking about the end, because he said, I don't know when it will be. I don't know the day, I don't know the hour. Um, but I think there's other ways of handling that as well. Um, for example, if one takes a preterist eschatology, which does seem to make a lot of sense, at least to me as I looked at it, compared to, say, the Left Behind kind of scenario, Hal Lindsey, um, then we're already in the end times. The fact that Jesus died and rose again, and the church started there in Acts chapter 2, uh, we're in the church age now, which is the last day. It's not a 24-hour day, it's a long period of time, but we know that the seventh day in Genesis was something that is continuing on even now. So a day in the Bible can be more than 24 hours. The day of the Lord, a lot happens there. So not too much for one day, certainly, for one 24-hour day. Paul, who wrote a large portion of the New Testament, other than outside of the Gospels, amongst the letters in the New Testament. In First Thessalonians, he says that the end is near, it seems. But then in Second Thessalonians, he says, keep working, don't quit your job. Um, Certain things have to be in place before the end comes. Now, Ehrman takes that to be a contradiction and a reason to say that Paul did not write Second Thessalonians, but he did write First Thessalonians. And indeed, amongst scholars of the New Testament, there are many who will say that Second Thessalonians is not one of the genuine Pauline epistles. But I think that if Jesus can be mistaken easily to suppose that the end is near, and the people that Paul wrote to apparently, uh, regardless of who wrote Second Thessalonians, it was addressing people who thought, based on First Thessalonians, that they might have missed the rapture or what have you. So it seems that it's easy to misunderstand people when they talk about the end. So we shouldn't be too quick to give this critical interpretation, critical as far as against the Orthodox traditional view. All right, so I think that the end can come at an hour when we think not, all through the Bible. So it's not something that we can pin down and say it's going to happen within, say, the next 20 years or 40 years or what have you. Okay, this book is misogynist and anti-Semitic and homophobic and has been used to justify all sorts of horrendous acts of suppression over the ages. Just look at the televangelists. Well, most of the Christians that I know that are thoughtful and sane and rational and orthodox will say that we should not look at the televangelists because they are out to lunch. Not all of them, but name it, claim it. Send me all your money so that God will bless you with riches and so on. That is not the gospel. That is contrary to Scripture. So we shouldn't listen to the televangelists in that case. The fact that the Bible has been used for all sorts of horrendous acts of suppression over the ages is totally irrelevant. It's kind of the opposite of the genetic fallacy. We can't judge the abuses of something as an argument against uh, it. If I use the salt shaker to beat somebody to death, that doesn't mean that the salt company should be held accountable for uh, my act. Because if they didn't make this, then I couldn't use it to kill people. No, no, that's retarded. Homophobic. Well, it does say that homosexuality is a sin, um, but it says that all sorts of things that the people who wrote the Bible did was a sin as well. So they're not saying that. I mean, they're not afraid of themselves. Anti-Semitic. The Bible, Old and New Testament, almost entirely, not quite entirely perhaps, but almost entirely, was written by Jewish people, um, and written to Jewish people originally, for Jewish people, about Judaism. So uh, the fact that that is the case means it's not anti-Semitic, misogynistic. Christianity was very liberating for women. There were leaders that in the early church, um, uh, Jesus talked to women, the apostles talked to women. People were surprised; it was scandalous, uh, but they did do that. They consider women to be equals, unlike the surrounding society. When it says that women should keep silent in church, uh, that is, uh, I would say, an accident of history in that culture. We should read in the cultural context that a book was written. In that context, women were uneducated because the society, not the church, but the society, was misogynistic and wouldn't allow women to have an education. So if they're always interrupting because they don't understand something, it would cause chaos, and uh, they wouldn't be able to say anything in the meetings. That's a plausible explanation. So that particular passage in Paul is not necessarily misogynistic, and we know from other things that Paul said and did that he certainly wasn't a misogynist. This is a dangerous book. Yes, it is. In it's like Aslan in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He's not safe, but he's good. So he's a dangerous lion, but he's a good lion. Jesus, the Word, the Bible, is a dangerous book. Um, how do you respond? So to sum up my response, pretty much everything this woman says, and it's very similar to everything that Bart Ehrman says in Jesus Interrupted, is pretty much wrong. Now, a lot of the stuff that he says in this book and other things that I've heard and seen from him is more or less technically correct, but said in a very misleading way. Um, for example, in misquoting Jesus, he says that the woman caught in adultery is not something that John wrote, or whoever wrote John did not include that in John. Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean what he seems to imply by it, that we have no idea what John said. Uh, in fact, just the opposite. We know exactly what he said. He did not say the woman caught in adultery, and don't throw stones at glass houses and so on. Uh, that everything else he did say, but not that. Um, and then we can't trust it, and it's been changed, and blah blah blah. Well, yes, there have been changes in the manuscripts, but we know what the original said. So it's like when I was in telemarketing, we would say I would try to word things in such a way so people would misunderstand what I was saying and get the wrong impression. So that's what Bart Ehrman is like. So while the scholarship is usually fairly good in what he has to say,